closed on election night, and that means we have had poll closings in all of these states that you see on your screen right now. Obviously, the main swing states that we are looking at in this batch of poll closings are Pennsylvania, Florida, and New Hampshire. I will give you all the calls that we can make right now. Starting in Pennsylvania, NBC News is characterizing the race in Pennsylvania as too early, but President Obama has a lead. That is the characterization by NBC News in Pennsylvania. In Florida, it is too close to call. Florida obviously critical every year with its 29 electoral votes. In the state of New Hampshire, it is also too close to call. New Hampshire was won by President Obama in 2008. It is a neighboring state to where Mitt Romney is from in Massachusetts. President's home state of Illinois, NBC News projects that President Obama will win Illinois. NBC News also projecting President Obama wins in Massachusetts. In the state of Tennessee, NBC News projects that Mitt Romney is the winner. In the state of Maryland, President Obama projected by NBC News to be the winner. In the state of Alabama, the projected winner is Mitt Romney. In the state of Oklahoma, which gave John McCain his largest margin of victory anywhere in 2008, Mitt Romney is the winner in Oklahoma. In the state of Connecticut, NBC News projects that Barack Obama has won the state of Connecticut. In the state of Mississippi, NBC News projects that that winner is Mitt Romney. In the state of Maine, this is interesting, the state has been, the projected winner of the state of Maine is Barack Obama. There is no specific call at this point on the second congressional district in Maine. Maine and Nebraska are the only two states in the union that divide their electoral votes by congressional district. 3 of the 4 electoral votes in Maine have been awarded essentially to President Obama in the NBC projection, but there is not yet a projection on the second congressional district and its 1 electoral vote in Maine. In the state of Rhode Island, NBC News can project that the winner is President Obama. In the state of Delaware, which is the home state, in the state of, we've got Rhode Island there. Next is Delaware. In the state of Delaware, which is the home state for Vice President Biden, the projected winner is President Obama. In the District of Columbia, which gave President Obama his largest margin of victory in 2008, NBC News projects President Obama as the winner. In the state of New Jersey, this is interesting. This is too early to call, but obviously New Jersey is voting under extenuated circumstances this week because of the devastating impact of Hurricane Sandy on this state. NBC, I have to tell you, may not call New Jersey specifically because of extended voting until Friday in New Jersey, but that is a special case. The state of Missouri is also being described at this point as too early to call. That does not reflect an advantage for either candidate. It just reflects that we do not have enough information to project an advantage in the state of Missouri. Recapping our earlier poll closings and what these and whether or not we can update these projections, we still are characterizing the race in Ohio as too close to call. Also in the state of North Carolina, it is still too close to call. And also in the crucial swing state of Virginia, NBC is still characterizing this race as too close to call. That's your roundup for poll closings as of 8 o'clock. This is the electoral vote and what the electoral map looks like at this point. Again, there have been no major surprises thus far in terms of how these states look based on when you compare it to the polling heading into tonight. But the biggest bellwethers, the biggest swing states tonight are still too close to call. Chris Matthews looking at this map. Pennsylvania, interesting characterization there. Pennsylvania, too early, but Obama has a lead.
Yeah, I think that's good for the Democrats, but you know, I've been hearing all week now about a 4-point to 6-point advantage ultimately that night. But I think it's going to be tighter than that. I think Pennsylvania's going to be tough. I think Casey, we're going to report on that in a moment. You know, these are going to be, they have to win Pennsylvania. Let's face it, this election's over if the Democrats lose Pennsylvania, but they should win it by 4 to 6. We'll see. It looks like it's going to happen.
Too close to call again in Florida, too close to call in New Hampshire, a couple of too early to calls in New Jersey, again, those special circumstances, and in Missouri from previous poll closing times, again, we've still got too close to call in Ohio, North Carolina, and Virginia. So in terms of what we didn't know heading into tonight, we still don't know any of that. In terms of Senate races, obviously there's a lot of important Senate races in a bunch of the states that just had poll closings. The incumbent Bill Nelson in Florida is facing a Republican challenger with Connie Mack. An important Pennsylvania Senate race, incumbent Bob Casey versus Tom Smith there. We're going to go for results and for characterizations of these Senate races in a lot of these important states now to Alex Wagner. Alex?
Thanks, Rachel. We do have some updates. In Maine, we have a projected winner. Angus King, the independent, taking the seat. He is the projected winner at this hour. Angus King, who, of course, is not a member of the Democratic or Republican Party, but is a pro-choice candidate and supports the Affordable Care Act, which probably bodes well for Democrats in the Senate. Over in Massachusetts, it is too early to call. Not a great surprise here. Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown in a nail-biter. Over in Missouri, much the same story. Senator Claire McCaskill and Todd Akin. After a massive hemorrhaging of Republican support following his legitimate rape comments, it's worth noting that Todd Akin got a late-stage infusion of cash. Over in Connecticut, too early to call with Chris Murphy and Linda McMahon. Linda McMahon, who, of course, has spent nearly $100 million in her 2 bids for the Senate. In Pennsylvania, same story. Too early to call. Bob Casey and Tom Smith. Over now to Florida, where we have a projected winner. Bill Nelson, the Democrat and the incumbent, who is getting sort of a late-stage run from his opponent, Connie Mack. He is the projected winner in the state of Florida. Over into Mississippi, Roger Wicker, the incumbent, the Republican, is the projected winner at this hour. And into Maryland, where Ben Cardin, again, the incumbent, the Democrat, is the projected winner. In Delaware, Thomas Carper, the incumbent, the Democrat, is the projected winner. Up to Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse, again, not a surprise, the Democrat, the incumbent, is the projected winner. Down over to Tennessee, where the projected winner is Bob Corker, again, an incumbent and a Republican holding on to his seat. And in New Jersey, as you mentioned, Rachel, this is going to be a tight one. One we're going to be looking at for some time. It is too early to call. Bob Menendez is in a tight race. As you mentioned, there will be extended voting, and that may drag this race in further down into the week. Let us take a look at the Senate at this hour. The Democrats have 35 seats. The Republicans have 39. Independents have 2. That's a gain of 1 seat for the independents, with, of course, Angus King right there in the center, possibly caucusing with the Democrats. We'll see. Back over to you.
Alex, thank you. Just to be clear on New Jersey, with that too early to call in New Jersey is a special circumstance at this point. One of the things that's happening in New Jersey is that voting has been extended till Friday. And so in terms of there being a call in New Jersey, this is a very unusual circumstance. No other state in the country is dealing with this. So the presidential race between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney in New Jersey, but also that Senate race. It's not that we can say that it is too close to make a projection there. It is that New Jersey is going to be too early, and it might be too early in New Jersey in a way that it wouldn't be in other states tonight, just because of that state's extenuated circumstances. Also, just looking at some of those Senate races right now in Massachusetts, Missouri, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, all of those races right now are being characterized as too early to call. However, Massachusetts, too early to call, but Elizabeth Warren is in the lead. Missouri, too early to call, but Claire McCaskill is in the lead. Connecticut, too early to call, but Chris Murphy is in the lead. And Pennsylvania, too early to call, but Bob Casey is in the lead. So all 4 of those states, those crucial Senate races, Massachusetts, Missouri, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, they're all being characterized as too early. But we are also able to say, based on NBC News decision desk data, that the Democrat is leading in all 4 of those races. Tamron Hall has the latest from our exit polling in Florida. Tamron, what are you hearing out of Florida?
We're taking a look at a lot of things out of Florida, and it turns out there was a big age gap in Florida, Rachel, a state, of course, with a large senior population. This may not be a huge surprise, but it is interesting information as we wait to hear more about Florida. Now, 2/3 of the voters under the age of 30 voted for Obama. Well, take a look at those over the age of 65. 59% of those folks, well, they went the way of Romney. Now, let's take a look at some of the key groups for each of these men. Here are a few key voters for Obama in Florida today. People who are not married, those who make less than $50,000 a year, and political moderates in Florida broke the way of Obama. Now, let's take a look at the lineup for Governor Romney. He did well among white evangelical Christians and conservatives. No big surprise there. But people who make more than $100,000 a year, also in his column, So that is a snapshot of Florida so far tonight. We'll keep a close eye on the Sunshine State because the sun may be rising, in fact, when we finally find out more information, at least final information on Florida. But that's some interesting insight and very similar, quite honestly, Rachel, to the makeup of people who sided with Governor Romney in the Republican primary, a lot of the wealthier Republicans, and we see that shaping up in the state of Florida.
Tamara, thank you for that. Also, it's interesting in Florida. Florida is one of the few important swing states right now where we do not also have a hotly contested Senate race that is also too close to call. In Florida, we have had a call, Bill Nelson holding onto his seat there against a pretty strong challenge from Connie Mack in that Senate seat. So at the Senate level, that race has gone toward the Democrats in Florida. But at the presidential race, the Florida race, still too close to call, just like New Hampshire, just like Florida, just like New Hampshire, just like Ohio, just like North Carolina, just like Virginia. Again, the call right now in Pennsylvania, interestingly, too early, but President Obama has a lead. Chuck Todd, interested in your take on this latest batch of numbers. Chuck, do we have Chuck? Chuck has been replaced by an animated map.
Look at Florida. Isn't Florida a beautiful state?
There you are. Hey, Chuck.
Estimates 46% of the vote in. Well, what does that mean? There was all the early vote. We have the early and absentee vote in Florida, and that's what fascinates me here because now we know the raw vote. This raw vote, almost all of it was early absentee. They dumped it early, and you see the president had about a 50,000-60,000 vote margin there. The question is that enough to overcome what is expected to be Mitt Romney advantages on Election Day voting? And I want to show you the county map because I want to point out two in particular here to watch. On early vote, it is clear to me. Hillsborough, Pinellas. This is the Tampa market. This was Bush 04, Obama 08. The president won the early vote in that county. Do those counties stay blue? He's leading in those counties now. Do they stay blue as the night goes on? That is sort of the swingiest area here. You know all about the I-4 corridor. But those two counties in particular, obviously they got it on the early and absentee. Did they do better there? And obviously when you're talking about Florida, Florida is it's a swing state, but it's a swing state because there's a lot of margins, if you will. Democrats need to run up the score in South Florida. Mitt Romney and Republicans have to run up the score in North Florida, particularly the Panhandle. But there's one other part of this tonight that I'm very curious about, and that's going to be Orange County. Orange County is no longer a swing county. It used to be just not too long ago. But there's an influx of Hispanic voters there, non-Cuban Hispanics. And in particular, it's Puerto Ricans. And if the president is getting 70% nationally, I've always believed he will get over 60% of the Hispanic vote in Florida. And if he gets over 60% of the Hispanic vote in Florida, I don't know if demographically he can lose the state of Florida. It certainly will mean it's going to be too close to call almost most of the night. What is the margin out of Orange County? Does he get a 100,000 vote margin out of Orange County, which has never happened for a Democrat before? But does he do that? It would be on the backs of this expanding non-Cuban Hispanic vote that has been coming into the state of Florida over the last 4 years, Rachel.
Chuck, in terms of the way that President Obama won Florida in 2008, when you look at the margin that you were identifying there with the early returns, you're saying that would mostly be early vote that was counted. Mm-hmm. Does that margin, that Democratic margin in the early vote, line up with the kind of way that he put together his victory in 2008? It looks like a much narrower margin to me.
I was just going to say, and honestly, when I've talked to folks on both sides, a margin that I was told the president needed to carry would have been somewhere north of 125, 130,000 vote margin. So this was under 100. Look, I've talked to experts on both sides very quietly tonight who both say they expect Romney to carry the state by less than 100,000 votes. Now, we know there are all sorts of potential challenge issues in the state of Florida because of the weird absentee issue with the signature that's going to create maybe a 3% provisional ballot. You know, 3% of all absentees could get set aside. The first because of this, the signatures didn't match. And then they may have to hand count them. Well, 3% of some 2 million potential absentee votes, that's a big chunk of votes. So anything decided, I think, by less than 50,000 votes could be subject to a challenge, particularly if it's the difference between getting 270 and not getting 270.
Briefly, Chuck, just one last point. Mm-hmm. Is Florida a must-win for both sides, or is Florida only a must-win for the Republican side?
It is an absolute must-win. There is one path of the battleground, if you will, for Mitt Romney without Florida, but it calls for him sweeping the firewall, the Midwestern firewall of the president. I mean, this to me is a checkmate state for the president. He carries Florida, it's checkmate. There is no, this is 29 electoral votes. There is making this up very, very, very difficult. Obviously, we have to be careful there, but it's very difficult. This is a must win for Mitt Romney.
All right, Chuck Todd, thank you very much for that. Again, Florida right now too close to call. New Hampshire too close. Ohio, North Carolina, Virginia, all too close. One very interesting call that we do have, or projection, excuse me, characterization of the race from this recent round of poll closings was in Pennsylvania, which is described right now by NBC News as too early to call, but President Obama having a lead there. Looking right now at these results, Steve, let me ask you specifically about this dynamic where the Florida presidential race is too close to call, but Bill Nelson has won that Senate race. Does that say anything to you?
No, and looking at the map with Chuck, there's no returns yet in from the Panhandle. So we're going to have an answer to a question that we've talked a lot about over the last couple of weeks, and that's the issue of Republican intensity and enthusiasm. When we see those returns come in the Panhandle, how is Mitt Romney performing against the George W. Bush margins in 2004? 2008 isn't the right comparison, but in 2004, where President Bush performed very well in the panhandle of Florida. And then, of course, if you remember back to the primaries, this was the part of the state that Mitt Romney did very poorly in.
And Gingrich did great there.
He was losing in the South over and over again. But if he has a real strong performance in the panhandle, we'll have a good indication, I think, about Republican enthusiasm in some other parts of the country.
And in the Florida Senate race, it is agreed by both sides that Bill Nelson had a terrible debate. So much for debates.
All right.
You know what's powerful watching all the numbers you've shown us, Rachel, is the extent to which the polling coming into this election has been accurate. There hasn't been one conflict so far. It really shows the ordinal power of these guys. The Bill Nelson is in. All these winners are no surprises yet. The fact that Casey's ahead, that McCaskill's ahead, that's good for the Democrats. McCaskill being ahead even when it's too early. The fact that Warren's ahead in the too early count up there. Everything matches up. So I was always very skeptical. I've been worrying about a Bradley effect, if you will, where white voters say they're going to vote for Obama but don't do it. That could still happen. But everything now is checking out. So these polls have been really good so far.
Again, those interesting characterizations on those Senate races that Chris was just referencing there. In Massachusetts, Missouri, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, all of those Senate races are being characterized by NBC News as too early to call. But in all four of those states, Massachusetts, Missouri, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, NBC News is also saying that the Democratic candidate is leading. All right, we want you to be aware that as you watch the poll closing times on the bottom of your screen that are scrolling through while we're talking, some states don't have all their polls close at the same time. If you are in one of those states, pay very close attention to that asterisk on the name of your state. Florida and Michigan, both states that are affected by this, please make sure and check poll closing times in your specific part of the state so you don't miss your chance to vote. This is MSNBC's election coverage. We'll be back with more after this.